As you can tell from the picture, I'm a proud grandfather since last December when my oldest daughter started adopting two boys. You can see the picture there. That's Sean, my son-in-law, in the middle, Josiah on the left, and Jude on the right. And I have discovered that it really is true. If I had known grandchildren were this much fun, I would have had them first. It is great to be a grandpa. And one of the things I like about being a grandpa is because your grandkids teach you about life. As you watch them grow up, as you watch your kids help them grow up, you learn things about life. Well, that's the case with my daughter Rachel. This is her first Mother's Day, and I have discovered from watching her, I've discovered it again, that for moms, life is a journey. Ups and downs and turns and all kinds of things. In fact, their journey is kind of like the journey that Israel took when they left Egypt and went to the Promised Land. There are a lot of great parallels. So today, moms, as I try to encourage you with my Mother's Day sermon, I want to remind you that mothers are on a journey. And so today I want to share with you 4 lessons about the journey that the Israelites took to the Promised Land. And I also want to share with you 3 things that God taught them along the way. So I'm going to be mentioning mothers a lot, but the truth is all of us are on a journey with ups and downs and turns. But I really want to be an encouragement to the moms today. So I want to specifically point out some neat things for them, and the rest of you can kind of translate it into your particular position. So let's start our story in Exodus 15, verse 22. This is right after the Red Sea. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. The first lesson that I learned about their journey is that their journey began with a miracle. Remember, they were backed up against the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army was coming to get them. Well, God opened the sea and then closed it again, freeing Israel miraculously and drowning the Egyptians. And so their journey began with this miracle. Moms, the truth is that your journey began with a miracle too. Your birth, or the birth of your children, they were miracles. Now, for the rest of us who are on a journey too, our journey maybe began with our salvation, or it began again when we dedicated our lives to the Lord, or it began with sobriety. Many people in our church have struggled with addictions, and you got on a new road when God helped you to get sober. Some of you started your journey when you got a job, when you got a family, when you found our church. All of us are on a journey. Well, my daughter Rachel's journey as a mom began with 2 miracles, really. Many of you know my daughter's not able to have children, but she wanted children, so she decided to adopt kids. And she said, I want to adopt a baby, and they said, it will not happen. You do not adopt babies. Moms keep their kids these days. You will not get a baby. Well, the picture up here with Jude was 5 months old last Christmas when Rachel got him. He is a miracle, and she begins her journey as a mom with that miracle. Another miracle is involved. Josiah and Jude's mom is still on drugs. She's always been on drugs. But if you look at Josiah, there is no evidence, 0, that his mom was on drugs when she was carrying him. That is a miracle too. And just the way the adoption process is going, yes, there's ups and downs, there have been difficulties, but for them, it's been a miracle. Moms, I think that says something about your journey, about how important it is, about how great it is, even though they're up and down. It began with a miracle. So it is a worthwhile journey. So let me encourage you, stay on the journey, stay faithful. Let's read on to a second section this morning as we are looking for lesson number 2 about their journey. take up where we left off. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter, and the Hebrew word implies poisonous, like a lot of alkali, so they could not drink it. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" The second lesson that I learned from their journey and Mom's journeys is that Israel's journey hit a rough spot. They left the Red Sea after the miracle start, and then for 3 days they had no water. That's a rough spot. And then they came to Marah where they were expecting water, and there wasn't any. Instead, there was just this bitter water that they could not drink. So when they got to Marah, the water was bitter. Now, isn't that interesting? At the Red Sea, they had too much water. That was a rough spot. At Marah, they didn't have enough water. That was a rough spot. Moms, I think that's a great definition of a rough spot, isn't it? Sometimes you get too much of what you don't want. Too many bills, too much whining, too much work to do. Sometimes you don't have enough of what you do want. And so there are rough spots on the road. Well, Moms, I don't want to discourage you, but it really is true. Your journey will have rough spots. Don't be surprised. Don't be discouraged by that. That is part of the journey. That's the balance. It began with a miracle, but there will be rough spots. So moms, kind of keep that in perspective. There is a second lesson that we learn from these very verses. Lesson number 3 is that Israel suffered from unmet expectations, and actually unrealistic expectations. Now, I know what you're saying. Brother Roger, how do you know that? How do you know they had unmet expectations? Well, the Bible tells us they grumbled against Moses. Grumbling is a sign that you have unmet expectations. For example, moms, if you don't get a Mother's Day card from the Queen of England, will you grumble? Why not? She forgot Mother's Day. You weren't expecting one, right? But if your kids don't give you a card or a present, will you grumble? Yes, you will, because you expect one from them. So you see, grumbling comes from unmet expectations, often unrealistic expectations. And that's what happened there in the desert. They did not find water for 3 days, and so they grumbled because they were expecting to find water. Now, my question is, what was their expectation? They were 3 days into the desert. What were they expecting? Okay, let me have you check your memory as we have covered the story of the Exodus. When Moses first went to Pharaoh, when Moses first talked about the Exodus, what did he say they would find in the desert after 3 days? Remember, God wanted him to say, we'll get 3 days out and we will have a worship service. We will serve the Lord out there. What did Moses first say? We're going to go 3 days in the desert we're going to hold a festival. Well, what does a festival imply? Piñatas and all that stuff, right? No, dancing, food, drinking, everything. So they were expecting to get 3 days out, and here was this festival, and Marah was not a festival at all. In fact, the word Marah means bitter, and it was a bitter experience. And so the people grumbled against Moses. I think because they had an unrealistic expectation. Do you hold festivals in the desert? I mean, really? I mean, that just doesn't happen. That's why they call it a desert. So they had unrealistic expectations. Moms, I know that you have been told things about being a mom that just aren't true. You have been sold unrealistic expectations. One mom wrote to a friend of mine and said, how do I have a family with no problems? What was she expecting? A family with no problems. Well, is that realistic? No, it's not. So, moms, you are going to have problems. So Be careful when you come up against unmet expectations. Realize, don't grumble. That just doesn't work. I asked PJ to change one of the songs this morning. He had a different song. I chose the one, "Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name. In the desert place I will rejoice. In the sunshine I will rejoice." Mom, that's what it's all about, being a mom. So you need to grow wiser in your expectations. You need to grow wiser in what it's like to be a mom. So rather than grumble, realize, okay, I have an unmet expectation here. I can learn from this rather than grumble and make myself miserable. Okay, let's get on to the fourth lesson. Here are the verses as we continue to read on, verses 25 to 27. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Really, the Hebrew word is a tree, not just a branch, but a tree. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made a decree and a law for them, and there he tested them. He said, "You listen carefully to the voice of the Lord and do what is right in his eyes. If you pay attention to his commands and keep all your decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. God used the rough spot, number 4, in order to create a learning situation for the people of Israel. This was a training exercise. When the people left the Red Sea, they were brand new on the journey. It began with a miracle, but man, they had a long ways to go. And so God said, well, how am I going to teach them what they need, not only for the journey, but for the promised land? And so he said, well, I need to have some training exercises. I need to have some learning experiences. And so that is exactly what God did. God put them through those training exercises, and that's what it means that God gave them a test. Now, the test was not to fail them. The test was to stretch them so that they would learn about themselves and they would learn about the journey, and it would really help. Okay, now here's the deal. God gave Moses a tree to throw into the water, and then the water became sweet. In other words, God healed the water. That's the context. They had this rough spot, this bitter spot that God healed. And then God revealed to Israel one of his names. Do you catch what it was? You should. I just gave it to you. What did God say? I am the Lord who heals you. And what exactly he meant by that was that the people in Egypt did all kinds of things that caused them all kinds of trouble, and God visited diseases on them. But God said to them, if you obey me, then I will keep you from doing those things. Your obedience will bring healing into your life. Your obedience will help you avoid the things that Israel went through. So you've learned the 4 lessons. Now this is the first thing that God taught them. The first thing he taught them out in the wilderness was if they obeyed God, they would avoid all of the diseases that God had visited on the Egyptians. And moms, this is an important lesson for you. You see moms who are miserable. You see moms who are just beside themselves. You see moms facing insurmountable problems. God's plan for you is better than that. And if you will obey what he says, you will avoid a lot of that. He will be your friend rather than have you be your own worst enemy. So it really pays to obey what the Lord says. Don't do what all your friends are doing. Don't do what you see on the soap operas or Dr. Phil or Queen Latifah or whatever, Instead, if you want to avoid what so many women struggle with, and moms, you know what I'm talking about. You're closer to these gals than I am. You know what's going on. You can avoid a lot of that if you do what he says. Okay, moms, I've got a question for you. That's the application. The people of Israel did what God wanted, and they avoided all of that. Moms, you need to do the same thing. Now, here's my question. Moms, what if you get off track? You know, it's easy as moms to blow it. It's easy to disobey, and consequences kind of come your way. Is it one strike and you're out? If you get off track on your journey, are you doomed? Well, obviously the answer is no, because of the God we have. What is God's name in situations like this? His name is the Lord who heals you. And that not only refers to physical healing, but it also means there is forgiveness. There is the power to restore things. So, Mom, there is really great hope there. You can miss a lot of trouble, and when you disobey and get into trouble, God can still help you. He is the Lord who heals you. Let's read on and find a second thing that he taught them on this training exercise. Chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, and then we're going to read 11 through 21. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt." You know what that means? We wish we hadn't put blood on our doorposts. We wish we would have just died with everybody else. Can you imagine anybody saying that? That's crazy. And then it gets worse. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted to. Is that really what happened? No, you don't do that to slaves. Their memory was very poor. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death. See a little exaggeration going on here? That often what happened. Okay, how does the Lord respond? Verse 11. The Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat. In the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." See, I told you it was a training exercise. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, the thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is this?" By the way, that's the word manna. That's why they called it manna, because it means, "What is this?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. Take an omer, that's about 4 quarts, 6.5 pints, I think is kind of the exact measurement. Take an omer. Okay, where was I? Take an omer for each person you have in your tent. The Israelites did as they were told and gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered as much as he needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. See, moms, you're not the only ones that get ignored. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. Duh. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning everyone gathered as much as he needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. A second thing that God told them was that they were to live one day at a time. In the morning, God gave them manna. At night, he gave them quail, and every day it was there. And so they are supposed to live one day at a time, trusting God for the next day. They weren't supposed to worry about the next day. They weren't supposed to do a lot of work and gather up a lot of extra manna for the next day. Instead, they were to live one day at a time, trusting God. And at this particular point, the Lord gives them another name. You know what he said? He said his name would be the Lord. Remember several months ago we did a study on God's name, I am the Lord, and we concluded, here's what it means. I am what you need. You can trust me. I am what you need today. I am what you need tomorrow. So you don't need to worry about tomorrow. You don't need to worry about next year. You can trust God one day at a time. And so God was teaching Israel they are to live one day at a time. No need to worry. No need to gather too much. Now, I find it interesting in the story that there were some people who did not believe it. They did not believe that the Lord was the Lord. They did not believe that he would meet their needs. And so they gathered more than they should have. They gathered more. And what happened to it? It grew maggots. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10 on your icky meter, how icky are maggots? One time when we were on vacation, we had a refrigerator shut off in the middle of the summer for 2 weeks. It was the grossest thing. We opened the door and guess what happened? It stunk. That's what happened to these folks. They did not want to live one day at a time. They did not want to trust God, so they gathered more. So it stunk. It did not work. Moms, here is a second lesson for you. I think it's really important that you realize that you can live one day at a time trusting God to provide. You don't have to worry. You don't have to work so much because it doesn't depend on you. Mom, is that good news to you? It doesn't depend on you. It depends on God, and God is faithful every day, so you can live today and not worry about tomorrow. Now, does that mean you don't plan for tomorrow? No, that's not what the Bible teaches. You don't worry about tomorrow as if you've got to fix everything in advance. You don't have to work today like there won't be anything tomorrow. So it's possible for you to live one day at a time. And if you do, you'll avoid a lot of the things that stink up other mothers' lives. One day at a time. Okay, are you ready for the third and last thing? The third thing that God taught them, chapter 16, beginning with verse 22. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person. And the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be the day of rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. By the way, the word Sabbath means to stop. You stop business as usual so that you can rest. So it is to be a stop day to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake. Boil what you want to boil, save whatever is left, and keep it until morning. So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any on the ground tomorrow. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. Nevertheless, some of the people went on the 7th day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where he is on the 7th day. No one is to go out. So the people rested on the 7th day. The third thing that God taught them, the third thing that they learned was that they were to rest on the Sabbath day. And notice that the Sabbath day was supposed to be different. In fact, it was different. There were several things that were different about that day. It was not business as usual. Number one, no manna was to be gathered. Wasn't even on the ground. Number two, it was a day they were to prepare for. Remember, every hour of the day, live for today, live for today, live for today. But on the 6th day, you think about the next day. So they were to prepare for the Sabbath day. And then the extra they collected did not spoil. It did not stink. It did not get maggots. And the people rested. They didn't need to work. They didn't need to cook because it was all done. And then on 2 different occasions, God used a Hebrew word that's really important. God told the people that the Sabbath day was a gift. Just like God gave them freedom, just like God gave them manna, just like God would give them the promised land, God had given them this day of rest. It was something that they needed. Moms, Americans today don't believe this. Boy, I don't know what it's going to take for God to convince us. But mothers today do not believe they need a day off. They believe, well, yeah, back in Moses' day, they needed a day off. But today, mothers don't. Somehow they are different. They can go 7 days a week with their pants on fire. Well, let me ask you a question. How did those who did not believe the Lord fare? How did those who went out on the Sabbath day to gather food, how did they fare? Not well. They went hungry. They thought it will be there. I'll be able to work tomorrow. I'll be able to gather it. But they went hungry. I think there is a promise here. There are things that moms get from a day off they don't get any other time. Moms, I know you think that you need all 7 days a week to get it all done. But Mom, there are some things more important than your to-do list. There are things your heart hungers for. There are things your soul hungers for. There are things your body hungers for. And if you go 7 days a week with your pants on fire, you will stay hungry for those things. But if you take the day off, then the Lord will help you with those things. And the other 6 days will be so much better. So, moms, here's the deal. To rest on the Sabbath is going to require some things from you. Number one, you need to trust God. You can't afford to take a day off because God will provide. You can trust God. Just like you live 1 day at a time without worrying because you trust Him, you take 1 day out of 7 off because you trust Him. The second thing I think it's going to take, number 2, is you're going to have to plan to do this. You're going to have to plan ahead. You know what I mean. There are things that need to be done on Sunday meals and other things like that. Just do them earlier. And you don't have to kill yourself on the Sabbath day. I know when I was growing up, Mom always had a roast or dumplings or something like that. We ate like a feast on Sunday. And then my mom heard a sermon about this. She says, I'm done. I need Sunday off too. And so we went home and we had other stuff. I need some amens from moms. Yeah, I mean, you need to plan. You need to tell your family, don't expect a big meal on Sunday. It ain't happening. Okay, you need to plan. Okay, that includes laundry. That includes getting the kids ready for Monday, things like that. You plan ahead. Okay, and then the third thing, I think this is the last one on my notes, is you need to see it as a gift. It is not an inconvenience. It is not an interruption in your schedule. It is a gift from God. So take it. Take the 1 day in 7 off. Okay, moms, here's the bottom line. Here's what I'm inviting you to do. I'm asking you from now on to remember some things, to get the blessing, to learn from the journey. I want you to remember, number 1, rough spots are normal. You don't need to grumble. You don't need to complain because of unmet expectations. They are normal, okay? Therefore, learn from them. They are teaching situations. Learn from them. And then, of course, do what God says. Before a tough spot, during a tough spot, do what God says. And God has a way of helping you. Even if you've taken a wrong step, He can forgive you. He can restore you. And then live 1 day at a time. Man, I know that's tough. Live 1 day at a time. And then, of course, take Sunday to rest. Now, that doesn't mean you sleep in the pew. Okay? Okay, you don't sleep in the pew. You can rest other places. All right? Hey, let's stand and pray together. I want to pray for the moms before we sing our final song. Our Heavenly Father, we love our moms so much. And we are so thankful that there are stories like this in the Bible that involve moms. So we just pray today that you can help them to remember the things that they have learned. Give them a great day today. And Father, in the future, as they follow all of the things that you've told them today, we just pray you will bless them and help them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Let's sing Grace Alone.